The young and the restless spoilers, a twist in the shadows. A cry for help. Nick pulled Sharon into his arms, his heart pounding with relief as the reality of her rescue began to sink in. Sharon's frail body trembled against his, and he whispered softly, "You're safe now. I've got you. Thank God." Sharon clung to him, her eyes brimming with tears. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you, Nick. Thank you for finding me." But just as they began to gather themselves, a faint, desperate cry echoed through the house. "Help!" The voice was weak, barely audible, but unmistakable in its plea. Nick froze, his ears straining to catch the sound again. "Did you hear that?" he asked, pulling back to look at Sharon. Sharon's face paled. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Nick, let's go. We can't stay here. It's too dangerous." But there it was again, a faint, agonized call for help, coming from somewhere deep within the house. Nick's brow furrowed. "There's someone else here," he said firmly. "I can't leave without checking." "Nick, no." Sharon grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong despite her weakened state. "We've done enough. Please, let's just leave before anything else happens." Nick hesitated, torn between Sharon's plea and his instincts. But the voice, the desperate, haunting voice, cut through his doubt. He couldn't ignore it. "I have to find out who it is," he said, determination hardening his features. "I'll be quick. Stay here and stay safe." Before Sharon could protest further, Nick moved towards the sound, his flashlight cutting through the darkness of the decrepit house. Into the depths the cries grew fainter as Nick searched, but they seemed to come from below. He found a door in the corner of the room, its hinges rusted and its edges splintered. When he pulled it open, a waft of damp, stale air hit him, accompanied by a sense of foreboding. The staircase beyond was steep and narrow, leading into what appeared to be a basement or cellar. Nick swallowed hard, gripping the banister as he descended. Each step creaked ominously beneath his weight, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. "Hello," he called, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. "Is someone there?" The faint cry came again, guiding him deeper. "Help, please." As he reached the bottom, his flashlight revealed a grim scene. The walls were damp and lined with mildew, and the air was suffused with the scent of decay. In the far corner of the room, a figure huddled in the shadows. Nick's breath caught in his throat as he approached. The person was a woman, her hair wild and matted, her body emaciated and trembling. She looked up at him with hollow, sunken eyes, her face gaunt and streaked with grime. A familiar stranger. Nick crouched beside her, his voice soft but urgent. "I'm here to help." "Who are you? Can you tell me your name?" The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. She coughed weakly, her body shaking with the effort. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Nick." Nick's blood ran cold. The way she said his name, it was familiar, hauntingly so. But he couldn't place her. Do I know you?" he asked, his heart pounding. The woman's head lolled slightly, her strength fading. "Help me," she murmured, her voice so faint he had to strain to hear it. Nick shook his head, frustration and fear warring within him. He didn't recognize her, yet something about her felt achingly familiar. Her features, though obscured by grime and exhaustion, tugged at his memory. He reached out, brushing the hair away from her face. "Who are you?" he repeated, his voice breaking. But before she could answer, a loud creak echoed from above. Nick's head snapped up, his pulse quickening. Someone, or something, was moving upstairs. A race against time. Nick knew he couldn't stay. Whoever had been holding these women captive might return at any moment, and he couldn't afford to be caught. He scooped the woman into his arms, her frail body light as a feather, and began to ascend the stairs as quickly as he could. "Hold on," he whispered. "I'm getting you out of here." As he reached the main floor, Sharon's wide eyes met his. "Nick, what? Who is that?" "I don't know," Nick admitted, his voice strained. "But she needs help. Together, they made their way out of the house, the fresh air hitting them like a blessing. Nick gently placed the woman in the back seat of his car before helping Sharon into the passenger seat. As he started the engine, his mind raced. Who was this woman? Why was she here? And why did she know his name? The questions swirled in his head, but for now, all that mattered was getting both women to safety. A haunting mystery back in Genoa City, the arrival of Nick and Sharon caused a stir, but it was the unidentified woman who became the center of attention. Her condition was critical, and she was rushed to the hospital. As the doctors worked to stabilize her, Nick stayed by her side, desperate for answers. But even as he waited, a gnawing unease took hold of him. This wasn't over. Whoever had orchestrated this nightmare was still out there, and Nick couldn't shake the feeling that rescuing these women was only the beginning of something far darker. As the woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, she whispered one word before slipping back into unconsciousness, a name that sent a chill down Nick's spine and confirmed his fears. Jordan. This version introduces a compelling twist and sets up a deeper mystery involving the new character and her connection to Nick and Jordan. Let me know if you'd like to develop this further. A shocking revelation. Heather's survival. Nick and Sharon stood frozen in place, their minds struggling to process the words that had just escaped the lips of the frail woman before them. I'm Heather. Please, save me, the woman repeated, her voice trembling, barely above a whisper. Nick's jaw dropped, his heart pounding so fiercely he thought it might burst. Sharon gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Heather, she managed to choke out, her voice filled with disbelief. But, how? You're supposed to be dead. The woman nodded weakly, tears streaming down her sunken cheeks. It's me. I never died. Jordan, she took me. She's been holding me here, please, help me. For a moment, Nick and Sharon could only stare, their minds racing with questions. How could this be true? Heather was presumed dead, gone from their lives in a tragic and mysterious disappearance. And now, here she was, alive but broken, a shadow of the vibrant woman they had once known. Breaking her free, the weight of the moment snapped Nick back into action. He crouched down, his hands moving swiftly to break the lock on the cage-like enclosure Heather was trapped in. Hang on, Heather, he said firmly, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions raging inside him. We're getting you out of here. Sharon, still shaken, grabbed a nearby metal rod and helped Nick pry the rusted door open. It groaned in protest before finally giving way. Heather slumped forward, too weak to move on her own. Nick caught her in his arms, his chest tightening as he felt how frail and cold she was. We've got you, Sharon said softly, brushing Heather's hair back from her face. You're safe now. Heather looked up at them with glassy eyes, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. Jordan, she did this to me. She wanted everyone to think I was gone, but she kept me here, tortured me. Nick's face darkened with fury. He clenched his jaw, his mind racing with the implications of Heather's words. Jordan had gone far beyond anything they had imagined. This wasn't just a game of manipulation or greed, it was a calculated and cruel attempt to erase Heather's existence entirely. The escape. Nick lifted Heather into his arms as Sharon guided the way out of the dark, decrepit house. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind seemed to carry the ghost of Jordan's sinister presence. But they pushed forward, their determination overpowering their fear. When they finally emerged into the cool night air, Heather let out a weak sob, her body trembling in Nick's arms. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought I'd die in there. You're not dying, Nick said firmly. Not today. Not ever again. Sharon placed a comforting hand on Heather's shoulder, her own tears streaming freely now. We're going to make sure Jordan pays for this. Every single thing she's done to you. The shocking truth unfolds as they drove back to Genoa City. Heather began to piece together her harrowing story. Through her broken voice and pained expression, she recounted how Jordan had faked her death, staging the perfect disappearance to avoid suspicion. Heather had been imprisoned for months, subjected to cruelty and isolation, all while Jordan used her presumed death as a weapon to manipulate those around her. Jordan, she wanted control, Heather explained weakly, her head resting against Sharon's shoulder. She thought, if I was out of the picture, no one would question her motives. Nick gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with anger. She's done, he said, his voice low and firm. This is it. We're exposing her for everything she's done. No more lies. No more manipulation. Heather nodded weakly, a flicker of hope returning to her eyes. Please, just make sure no one else suffers because of her. Back in Genoa City when Nick and Sharon arrived with Heather, the sight of her sent shockwaves through the household. Family members and friends gathered in disbelief, their reactions ranging from joy to anger to overwhelming grief at the realization of what Heather had endured. Is this real? Someone whispered, tears streaming down their face. Heather, you're alive? Heather managed a small, fragile smile. I'm alive, she said, her voice still faint but filled with a new determination. And I'm ready to tell the world what Jordan did. Jordan's reckoning, Heather's return and testimony ignited a firestorm of revelations. As the authorities were called and investigations reopened, the full extent of Jordan's crimes began to unravel. Evidence of her involvement in not just Heather's captivity but other manipulations and wrongdoings surfaced. Her carefully constructed web of lies began to collapse, leaving her with nowhere to hide. For Nick and Sharon, Heather's survival was a miracle, but it also came with a heavy burden. They knew that the fight wasn't over, not until Jordan was brought to justice. But for the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. Heather's strength and resilience became a rallying cry for everyone who had suffered under Jordan's machinations. Moving forward as Heather began her journey to recovery, surrounded by the love and support of those who cared for her, Nick and Sharon made a vow. They would protect her, fight for her, and ensure that Jordan's reign of terror ended once and for all. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: the truth would no longer remain in the shadows. Heather's survival was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the unyielding power of justice. This version completes the dramatic twist, showcasing Heather's resilience and setting up the eventual downfall of Jordan. Let me know if you'd like to add more details or extend the story further.